Hey, and welcome to this new episode from Hadith Tech Podcast. Today we are having a great guest, which is uh, Dr. Matthew. How are you doing?
Very good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I was really waiting for this episode for, I think we have been arranging it for a month or more when we first talked about that.
Sure.
Uh, so how do you feel about, would you like to introduce yourself for the audience first so we could go from there?
Sure, I'd love to. And thank you for having me on. So, I'm Dr. Matthew Merman, the CEO and founder of Anarchy. We're a company that's building open source AGI for developers. We're trying to liberate AGI in any way that we can find and build up a community of hackers that are working together to make it something that everybody can use.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's really short introduction, which is like started from the last thing. Before so to start with anarchy, so how I remember that you mentioned that almost like the idea of anarchy and the name that, like you chose it was something related to because you didn't like the AI field at that time. So would you like to start with the story related to that?
Sure. So, about a year and a half ago, I was finishing my PhD. I was doing a PhD in AI safety.
Yeah.
And when I was finishing my PhD, I was looking at the possibility of going and doing a professorship. And while I was going around to different universities, I realized that at the same time, ChatGPT was coming out. OpenAI had released a few large models, but they'd released them behind closed APIs. And all of the researchers that I was talking to, they were trying to get their hands on the models and work with the models and release papers on them, but they couldn't get a handle on what was actually like a consistent model, which meant that the benchmarks would be terrible in papers, and this ended up with like a really skewed power distribution in the academia among researchers, and it made it very difficult to do research. I looked at like what a career in academia would actually be versus what I actually wanted to be building, and I was like, okay, well, OpenAI is making this a huge pain in the ass right now. I can't go and continue being a researcher. I need to fight this. So I left to build a startup, and over the course of my journey, I realized that really what I wanted to be doing was making AI that hackers could use. And at the time, OpenAI had been having this rhetoric. It started out as literally open source AI, but they were uh, um, they were controlled by people who really believed that AI was so dangerous that it needed to be under authoritarian control. They needed to control everything.
Yeah.
So I looked at it and I thought, like, what is the thing that I can do that will piss these people off the most, that will screw with what they're doing? And I was like, okay, well, giving the AIs access to the rest of the world, giving them access to your data, giving them, ability to call your APIs. And I was like, okay, well, if you really believe that AI is going to destroy the world, that would be a very dumb thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I made that our business plan. We're going to give the AIs access to the world, and I called the company Anarchy because I was like, these people, they're going to think it's anarchy.
Oh, okay, awesome. And from then, how when you started the company, how did it go? How was like the full challenge and journey that you had?
It has been a pretty crazy journey. We are on our like third or fourth, I don't know, 100th pivot, depending on what you count as a pivot. We started out working on code search, semantic code search, and this is
Yeah.
like long before vector databases were really used for semantic search. And we had some cool ideas about how to do it. And we released some of our things when we found it's actually very difficult to get people, like, even if you have a 10 times better product in code searches, it's difficult to get developers to try new tools because
Yeah.
and I think about myself there. I'm still using Emacs. I've been using Emacs since 2009. Basically, haven't tried like anything new. I tried Copilot for a little while,
Yeah.
but yeah, it wasn't enough to get me off of Emacs. And yeah, we went around to companies trying to sell it to companies, and they weren't having it. So we decided to pivot uh, to code generation for fun, because my code search was really like a stepping stone to AGI. So I was like, you know what, let's just go a little bit further down the AGI path, and let's use our code search in a code generation platform. So we built a code generation platform, and we made it a lot of fun, and that's what we got into YC on.
Oh, awesome. That's really great. Like, by the way, since you mentioned like semantic research, I think this was like before starting even a company and before having that as like something that people would use it. So, how that idea started with you?
Semantic code search. So, semantic code search came from me being a Haskeller. So, I've been using Haskell since 2010, and
Okay.
it's always been my favorite language, but less my favorite language because it's like particularly easy to write code in, and more it was my favorite language because there was this cool tool called Hoogle for it.
Yeah.
And Hoogle was a search engine for Haskell where you could search by the types that you were using in the language rather than by like the variable names in the language. So you could write a specification for what you wanted your code to do and then search all of the libraries for Haskell and see if there's already code that had that like formal specification, which was awesome.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it made coding so much easier.
Yeah.
And then, I started coding in Python. I was like, I miss this. Like, why doesn't this exist for Python? So I started writing stuff like that for Python and for JavaScript.
Yeah, awesome. And from then you had like your own like code search stuff and it started.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's really great. And from then, like when you joined YC, how was your experience? When did it add for you? Like because I know like a lot of people who are going to YC, they have like a different mindset before and after YC.
Well, I mean, YC added so much. It was fantastic. So when we went into YC, we'd been spending 3 months trying to fundraise, trying to get some traction, and it really wasn't working for us.
Yeah,
Like I might have great credentials, but I had no idea how to raise money. And like it was disheartening working for like 3 to 6 months without any funds whatsoever, without customers. And we finally got into YC and we're like, fuck yeah, we're like, this is going to make things easier. They're going to, on top of them giving us money, because it's not very much money, but it is enough to live on. Uh, we were excited because that meant that we would be able to finally raise money one day and get a lot of mentorship, which was like, I knew that mentorship was important, but I didn't realize just how important over the course
yeah,
of YC. Like, you only have like one meeting with your partners every couple of weeks if you really go out and look for it, but that meeting can be really transformational, and it's only like a 20-minute meeting, and they can
yeah,
like change everything you're doing. And then midway through YC, they have a 2-hour lecture about taking care of your own mental health, taking care of your company's attitude. And at the end of the lecture, they're like, you know what? The biggest thing that you can do as a company is go out and find outside coaching. So I did that. And that's been
yeah.
the best decision. So I don't think without YC, I would have done that.
Yeah, that's really awesome because like you know usually like I mean you went to YSI after like having a PhD experience and like let's say school experience, and usually with that people doesn't have much like of business experience and idea about coaching or like mentorship. So this kind of thing that really get great to see or hear about like that. And how was that the experience from you from shifting from academic area to like starting a company?
It took a long time to like fully shift mindsets.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I've always been of like build it and build it fast sort of person, but it took a long time to like really turn around and learn how to sell.
yeah,
That's the biggest difference. Like when you're selling in academia, you sell based on how technical. Like it's always just showing the technical thing first. So this is like why I lost all of my investor meetings early on. Like every time an investor meeting, I go deeply into the details of how the thing worked, and then
yeah,
like doesn't matter whether it was a good idea or what wasn't a good idea. You lose your audience that way unless your audience is specifically looking for that type of information, which
yeah,
they're not.
yeah. Yeah, and what kind of the ideas or like topics that people would be looking for at that meetings, at those meetings?
People are looking to see people are looking to see that you have the right mindset. I think that's the first and most important thing.
Yeah,
They're trying to fit you into like a very specific mold of this person is. I've heard it called the scout mindset, but it's not just the scout mindset. it's like scout and growth and optimism at the same time. So they're looking for like those three things
Yeah.
first and foremost, and then they look for like whether I I sat on a lecture with Nat Friedman. Nat Friedman specifically says he matches people against how Genghis Khan they are like. So like how like if they seem like conquerors, not just like smart, but they seem like nothing can stop them.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that's like one of the most like important thing for you to be like or to start a startup, because like you had like you mentioned that you had like couple of pivots, so we will not go and count them, but like what kind of things that made you like unstoppable, let's say, or like made you continue with this kind of pivots?
Well, part of it is that, I gave up on academia. I know that I hate working at a company. I gave up on academia and you can't really go back. So it's like, what else is there for me to do? I guess I'm going to build a startup. Like, that's it. If I don't build a
Yeah.
startup, I'm going to be out on the streets. I'll have to like become a farmer in rural Pennsylvania or something, a
Yeah,
beet farmer.
that makes sense because like you already like when you went to academia you get like like overqualified for companies, or
Yeah.
like yeah, for normal stuff, like, and you don't want to work with that. That's really awesome. And from then, like, how was your experience in academia? Because like you studied at Carnegie Mellon and then you moved to EHT Zurich.
Yeah.
So like how was that experience, and did that experience in academia add anything for you, like in the startup world?
I mean, it gives me a lot of creds, like street cred.
Yeah.
I definitely like look like an AI person now because I spent 4 years, 5 years doing AI research. Uh, Also, I got very good at giving presentations, which is occasionally useful. Got very good at making slides, which is less useful than I thought. Actually, it was probably detrimental how good I was at making slides. When we were starting raising money and talking to customers, I would create these long, like 20, 30 slide pitch decks
Yeah.
where like you go over details and there would be graphics all over the place. And what I didn't realize is that like this just adds attack surface. This is what you call this in academia when you're like write a paper and you're submitting the paper for review. You want as few claims in the paper as possible because every claim is an opportunity for somebody to say, but I think that's wrong. So you say like
Yeah.
three things. They're like, these are my three claims. Here's the mountain of data to back up these three claims. And
Yeah.
the same is kind of true when you're giving a presentation in business. You want as little attack surface as possible. So I went through YC and YC was like, okay, your slide decks, they are now 4 slides long.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And like, yeah, that's really awesome. From them, how would you know like what kind of stuff that you would like downgrade or like just focus on it when you write or when you make a like presentation at that time?
You focus on the most impressive things.
Okay. And what was it
Pretty
for you
easy. You
for?
pick the
Yeah.
biggest numbers, you pick the like most exciting, like the most exciting features, the most exciting partnerships, whatever. Whatever's most impressive. You put that first and you just pick out the 5 most impressive things.
Oh, awesome. And what was it for you for Anarchy? Like if you would do a deck right now or slides right now, what would it be?
Right now slides. Well, the right now slides differ from the slides from last time I gave a presentation. The right now slides are, I guess, our team is wonderful and includes I think now like 50 contributors, which it doesn't compare to Ivy's 1,000 contributors,
Yeah.
but I'm really excited to have those 50 contributors. And yeah, our Discord engagement is going really, really well. Uh, what what other numbers do we have that are amazing? We don't have that many great numbers right now.
That's
Like
fine
we
if you don't
focus on
remember
our
them all.
Discord KPI, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's fine if you don't remember them all, because like just like for the people who are listening, we are
Yeah.
having this kind of like natural conversation, and we have just like we didn't prepare the question before our changes with Matthew. And for Ivy, since you mentioned it, just like a huge shout out for Daniel, because like he was the one who connected me with Dr. Matthew, and I have worked with them a couple of months ago, which is like huge shout outs for him. Yeah. So like, how do you compare? Like, not how you compare yourself. Let's say, how would you feel about yourself, uh, 5 years ago with now after like having all of this experience? If you go to back like to your university years and to your PhD, what things that would you would do different at that time that would make you stand out?
I mean, I think I would have graduated sooner and gone into business sooner. Like, I'm pretty glad that I did a PhD. It was fun. I got to meet a lot of different people. It expanded my mindset. I can call myself Dr. Matt now, which is fun. I
Yeah.
have a little Dr. Sexy sign above my guitars
Yeah.
that some of my friends gifted me when I graduated. And that's really important to me, that little Dr. Sexy sign. But, you know, I I took an extra 3 years to graduate because I thought I wanted to go and become a professor, and, spending all of that preparing for that, that didn't really provide me other than, like, proving to myself that I could do it so that
Yeah.
I'd never have that nagging question in the back of my head, "Can I do it?" Uh, it wasn't really the thing that I wanted to be doing with my life, and I'd spend a lot of time sitting there, like, working on presentations and, like, having, like, panic attacks, like, "Should I be doing this presentation? I don't know if I should be doing this isn't really what I wanna be doing."
Yeah, and you will have like at that time deadlines and like submissions you do and all of this kind of academic style stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And from them, like, and I think like during academic, you would have this kind of perfectionist mindset. I think because like usually in academics like that, you need to be the most perfect and have everything without any mistakes and stuff like that. But like I
Yeah.
think in the startup world, it's kind of different a little bit because like in startup worlds, it's just like try
I
and
think
make mistakes.
well, you should try and make mistakes, but I think it's actually kind of a misnomer right now. I think it's an overstated fact that, like, your MVP needs to be quick and you need to launch early. I think what's very important is that you move quickly. You definitely should move quickly, but being a perfectionist is actually great in the startup world. Like, there's so many things that just don't work unless they're perfect. The
Yeah,
trick is like not being a perfectionist, or uh not being oppressively a perfectionist.
yeah. And how would you like do that? How would you know like when you should be like too much perfection or just like you have like you know that the MVP is ready? How would you understand that equation itself?
I I think, like, it's hard to understand. It's more of a feeling. It's more of a pattern matching thing. Like, you got to get outside people to tell you, like, look, you're waiting too long to release this thing, or look, you released this too early. This didn't work. I mean, you also have to just try things and see what works for yourself.
Yeah. And do you have any advice like for people to figure out or like to based on your experience that would make them understand if they are too early or too late?
I think most of the time people are both. So I think
Yeah.
most of the time people release too soon without putting enough work into the thing.
Yeah.
I think like in startups especially, it cannot be understated just how much an extra few hours works. And I think this is actually the thing that my PhD taught me. When I started my PhD, like, everybody in the group was like, this person is a hard worker, but I still was unprepared for the amount of work that went into every paper deadline. So, like, during the paper deadlines, the entire office would come in, and the paper deadline would be at midnight, and we'd all come like 24 hours before that paper deadline, pull an all-nighter, work like 10 of us together in a room on one paper. And then after the paper deadline, I handed it in and I'm like, I'm done, thanks. And then my advisor was like, no, what are you talking about? Like, the it's technically still open if you like try resubmitting it a few times. Like, it says it's closed, but you can resubmit it. So we would sit there and we would like look for typos for 2 hours, like until 2 in the morning, checking for like these tiny mistakes and fixing them and resubmitting. And I think like not enough people have that mindset, that like like you should get things in early, get them in quick, but at the
Yeah.
same time you have way more effort to put into them than you think you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think like the effort that you put to them could be like, as you mentioned, it's small things like typos or stuff like that, or like at late time, which is could be boring for people, but like this kind of boring work could add value to you. So how do you like?
It's attention to detail.
Yeah, so attention to details, which is like could be very boring for people. But like, how would you suggest people to look at this kind of details and think about this kind of in parentheses like boring work work?
My favorite thing that somebody told me was that a startup is like an onion. Uh, when people look at it, the first thing that they see is the outer layer.
Yeah,
And then they start peeling it away for the inner layers. So if you're not paying attention to detail, like if they see a blemish on that outer layer, they're not going to get to the inner layers, the inner things that are good. They're just going to like turn away that onion and be like, no, I don't like this onion.
yeah,
So when you're building things, everything that you see needs to be perfect on the outside, and then like you can have a little rotting core.
yeah. That makes sense. And like, I think it makes sense even like in marketing and all of that stuff. So people need you need to get like people attention first, then you will need to like get them connected to you and do stuff like that. And from that like perspective, for Anarchy, what kind of stuff that you are doing to get people to use Anarchy more and be able before going there? Wait, do you have any business model right now for Anarchy?
We do have a business model, but we have a product that's in stealth mode that I can't really talk about.
Okay,
That's leading
that
the business
that's
model.
fine. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So because like I was going to ask you, how would you like get people to use Anarchy right now, and how would you build a community around that so you could like convert them to like paying customers or even like to super fans?
So the way that I think about it in developer infrastructure is very similar to developer tooling. So like we're a developer infrastructure and tooling company. And very early on in the journey, I started speaking to a lot of other CEOs that were doing developer tooling and infrastructure and trying to sell to them. And they all said basically the same thing. The only way that we as a company adopt developer products is if our developers say to adopt the products. But you're not selling to the developer, you're selling to the company, which means that for us, the first thing that we have to go and do is get developers to use the product.
Yeah,
So the way that I think about getting developers to use the product is first you want to give to the community. You want to give first, not take first.
yeah,
So we build an open source project and we try to get people to work on that. And like first thing that I think about doing is what can we put in this project that's valuable, and then I think how can I like get people to come and join us. We have a bounty program to get contributors to come and work on it, and in the bounty program, like eventually we had so many more applicants than we possibly had bounties to give away to applicants. I was like, okay, well, here's a bounty program on coming up with ideas for our open source projects. So basically, we're just like giving away money to work on open source projects at the moment in order to build up a community that's working on tools. And uh, yeah, that's how I think about getting people into our projects.
yeah. That's awesome. Like from that perspective, how do you feel like people would um stay for a long time in the project? Like if we didn't have this kind of money part in if we didn't have this kind of bug bounty program or like bounty
So what
program.
I found was very interesting. So initially I thought that the bounty was going to be the biggest thing that attracted contributors, but once contributors came in, a lot of the contributors were in college or just after college, and they were really just trying to prove to the world that they could program. So
Yeah,
like they were just like, can't I don't care about this bounty. I just want to make a commit. And I was like, well, that bug doesn't have a bounty attached to it. You have to know that. And people were still like interested in beefing up their resume that way. But in terms of keeping people around, I think that the way to do that is just to build the friendliest, most teaching central, teaching forward community.
yeah,
Uh, Also, to do incredible for us to do incredible things that excite the community, but that's harder to automate. Being a friendly community, this is easy to automate. So
yeah,
like I was friends with George Hotz back in the day, and I've been following his comma journey. And like this like really inspired me. I really like how he streams, he gets people involved in his coding, and how he like builds a bounty program around that. And that's a lot of how I based Anarchy on. But when I look at how he talks to people in his streams, how he talks to users, and how he organizes it, like I don't think he really encourages people to like teach each other and to be friendly with each other. And that was one of the first things that I wanted to do with our community. I wanted to make a community where people are really encouraged to teach each other how to do things. My
Yeah.
philosophy is if you have a community that's teaching you how to do things, you're not going to leave because this community is helping you.
Yeah. And this is like one of the things that you could see more like the most in like programmers, which is like they are, you could like name them as learning creatures or learning humans. So because like programming is having like this huge like cycle of new technologies that's coming up every now and then, and people would like to still learn from that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how, like, if you think about like from that perspective, if you think about like programmers who are like in college and after college, you will see that mostly they are going in that way you mentioned. But like, have you been able to attract like programmers, senior programmers, to like contribute to Anarchy? If you haven't, how would you think that you would be able to
I
get to
mean,
them?
I don't know what a senior programmer is. So we had this job posting online for the last like month for a senior full stack engineer. And like, I look at all of the resumes and I look at all the skills, and none of the applicants are nearly as good as so many of the applicants for our open source contributor job role that was open. And in that role, it literally says like unpaid. And most of those applicants, like, we have applicants that are 18 years old. There's a kid who was 15 years old and like doing research at MIT that applied to work with us.
Okay,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, like I look at that profile, I'm like, well, okay, he doesn't have the giant stack of certifications that this like 40-year-old dude has, but do you need that to program? Like, we're using a different technology stack than this guy with a job. I'm not like, when I'm hiring somebody, I'm not like checking off the boxes of are they using this technology? I'm asking myself, are they going to be willing to learn the new technology that we're going to adopt in like 2 weeks because things are changing? Are they going to like go into a existing code base and just like sit there for 18 hours and have the energy to do that, to figure out what's going on? Or are they like, are they satisfied and they know what they want and they just want to be a middle manager?
Yeah.
So I don't think of attracting senior programmers. I think of attracting people who have energy and who are excited to grow and excited for new technology and excited to grind.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think this like kind can define your culture at Anarchy, which is
Yeah.
like you already defined it. So just like because like you are choosing people based on your culture. So how do you feel like the importance of building a culture for your company and being clear about that culture before going to like the importance? Would you like mention or share how did you come up to this kind of uh, mindset or like this culture?
Trial and
Uh,
error.
Thailand, okay, that's awesome.
It's trial and error. And I read a lot of books. So like in January last year, I was sitting around and trying to sell things, and my co-founders said, "Look, I really wish you were better at selling things. Like, here's a book on selling things." So I read the book, and then I was like, "Oh my god, there's so much information in this book that I did not previously know," because I was in academia. All that I was reading were academic papers, research papers, textbooks, and stuff like that. And I'd never picked up a business textbook because I thought, like, well, there can't be real knowledge in here. But I
Yeah.
did that. And I was like, oh my god, there's real knowledge. So over the last like few months, I've read 40 various business marketing, you know, communication management books. And one of the thing, there are two books that really stuck out: The Culture Code and Start with Why. And before that, like, I tried various things to build up a culture. I tried just being really pleasant to work with, like making culture where we had unlimited time off and free time to hang out, and we like we're climbing together a few times a week, and a culture where, like, we sat down and had deep conversations with each other about how we liked to work. And what these books said is, no, 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 that's not actually how you build a culture. How you build a culture is you search really hard internally for the, like, truest things about yourself, and you look for people like yourself,
Yeah.
and then you clarify that into statements about yourself, and you're just unabashedly yourself. And I looked at myself and I was like, okay, well, I did a PhD. I am fucking hardcore. I am, like, I will work until 2 a.m. Before a deadline every time. I'm willing to learn. I like arguing. I like debating things, but I don't like passionately debating things. If I have to passionately debate things, I have problems. So I said all of these things in the culture. I also say I like teaching. So I distilled these into things and I tried them. And some of the things, some of the phrases I tried, they made slightly wrong cultures. Like, after it grew a little bit, I was like, okay, I don't like it when everybody is spending all of this time working on documentation, not doing things. So I said in the thing, okay, doing things is the most important thing. That's literally one of our mantras. Then I find people who like doing things.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And from that, like you mentioned, yeah, at the beginning of this like conversation, you mentioned like how ICT gave you something related to mental health and to not get like burnout and focus on yourself and stuff like that. And right now, you mentioned like you were working in like till 2 a.m. and you had all of this kind of stuff. So I think like at the beginning of your of starting up like Anarchy, you had like this kind of hardworking night stars and everything. So how did that affect you, and how did you realize that you should focus like on yourself at that time?
Well, I so when I say focus on myself, I don't mean like, going to spas for, I mean, I do like going to the spa, that's great. But I don't
That's
mean like
another
going
step.
to this. When I say focus on myself, I mean think about really like who I am and what I'm like, and then try to project it, try to magnify yourself. That's what I
Yeah,
mean when I say focus on yourself, not like, take more time for myself or take more time off. Because I think that there's a cultural phenomenon from people who, like, haven't started billion-dollar companies, where people say they need work-life balance.
yeah,
And I think that's something that you say if your life is not your work. So
yeah,
I've just made sure to make what my life is my work. So my work is my life. So, like, there is no work life balance. It's completely balanced.
yeah,
Like, every moment that I'm working, I love it. So those nights, it's like sometimes, like, I'm sitting there for like I was yesterday. I was programming, and I was sitting in one spot so long that my eyes hurt by the end of the day. But I wasn't like unhappy that I was sitting there and programming so long. I probably should have gotten up a few more times and blinked. But
yeah. I understand that. And have you ever faced like burnout or something like that?
burnout. A little bit during my PhD, but I think that's because I was working on the wrong thing.
Yeah, but you didn't face such thing when you are working in Anarchy.
No, not on my startup. On my startup, I have enjoyed every moment of it. And I mean, also, like what Sam Altman says is that burnout, it doesn't just come from working on something that you don't like, it comes from working on something that's not going well.
Yeah. So sometimes
So,
it's just like something like from external resource stuff that you are having factored.
yeah. So I think with Anarchy, I created this mindset of, instead of like running experiments all the time. So there are definitely experiments and little experiments. Instead of running one giant experiment, like what I hear a lot of people say when they're starting a company is, I'm going to like test this business model. And if this business model works, it's a company. And if it doesn't work, it's not a company. And they go out for 3 months, they create a product, they talk to customers, they say, customers, do you want this product? And they say no. And then the company is dead.
Yeah.
Whereas I realized early on, because this wasn't my first company, that like the chances of that working were incredibly, incredibly low. And if I thought about it like that, then I would get burnt out. So how I instead thought about it was, I'm creating an entity. And I'm going to try to put as many like resources into that entity as possible. And if I can grow this thing, if I can let or like create a plant and grow this plant, then like that's my success metric rather than like is this one product for this one company like working or is this one like idea working. And like I got people involved, I got investors involved, I got customers involved, I got advisors involved, and the more people who said yes, I want to work with you, that's the thing that gave me like the success to not burn out.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really awesome. And you mentioned like a few minutes, like you mentioned the books that you read. Do you share them anywhere, or do you share a review related to them anywhere that people would like, if they would like?
I'm happy to send them to you after this. I've got them on my Audible and on my Kindle.
Okay, so then we could share them in the description of the
Yeah,
video and the description of the podcast as well,
sure.
so the people could check that. And from then, like, how would you suggest people who would like who did go to PhD, like before going there, why did you give up on PhD and academia?
Well, I didn't give up on my PhD. I finished my PhD.
Yeah.
And I spent an extra 3 years working to get into a professorship before deciding it wasn't for me. But yeah, most of the reason that I gave up on the idea of continuing in academia was that I really wanted to be building something. I didn't care about teaching. I wanted to be building something right now to get us closer to AGI and to do something for hackers. Uh, writing research papers, like very downstream, there's some effect there. But also I was working on AI safety, and the stuff that I was working on for AI safety wasn't ever what I was excited about. I got into AI safety because at the time that was what was a really hot thing to be working in. And I saw all of these people work on AI safety in these like theoretical, philosophical ways. Uh, I don't know if you remember, but there's this organization called MIRI in Berkeley, started by Elazar Yudkowsky, and a lot of my friends from Carnegie Mellon had gone and done research there. And I was going to all of these MIRI TED Talks with GeoHot, and we were sitting there and trying to come up with these ways to make progress on the idea of AI safety, like with type theory and with like sheaf theory from topology, and it just felt really not helpful. So I wanted to go and say like, well, if everybody's trying to be philosophical about this, can we do something actually numerical? So I went and I was working on verifying neural networks with automated theorem provers, and it kind of worked, but not in a way that it was ever going to be practical, and it was just something that could also be used by hackers. So I just got into it because I wanted to prove people wrong about something. And once I proved them wrong about something, what I was more excited about was actually building an AGI system, finding immortality, getting to that singularity that can save humanity.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you just like didn't like that, like in academia or stuff like that, go like fully theoretical without having practical actions there. And like how what do you just, I guess, to people who are in academia and feeling the same situation or having the same feeling that they are in?
I think that you can make academia as practical as you want.
Yeah.
And I would say try to make it practical from within academia before deciding that academia is not right for you. And then, yeah, it really depends on the person.
Yeah, so we don't have like a one single answer for
I think
that.
I think it depends on how much you like teaching. I think it really comes down to that. Even as a researcher in a top school in academia, like you're going to be spending a lot of time teaching, and if that's something that excites you, then go to it's not one is practical and the other is theoretical. It's one has teaching and the other doesn't.
Yeah, I understand that. But like even like if you go to like as you mentioned at the beginning, you went to when you start Anarchy and stuff like that, one of the things that we are focusing on is teaching people so they could be able to use Anarchy. So you just like get back to the same, let's say, cycle somehow. And how do you feel about that?
I think it's more like I am teaching my community to teach so that I don't have to teach.
Okay, so you are just giving them resources and you are enabling them to teach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're not doing
I
the
think
job itself.
at some point you have to teach at some it's just there is a difference in mindset in business versus academia. In academia, you have to stick with your mentees
Yeah,
for like 5, 10 years, and when you succeed or fail, it's really succeeding or failing your mentees.
yeah,
In business, you're you have to think of the entire group. Everybody affects everybody else. So you can't be teaching at some
yeah,
level. You can teach your community. So that when we're teaching in Anarchy, the community is kind of our customers. I mean, we have enterprise customers and we have community customers, but like I'm doing the teaching as a way to sell them something, not like doing the teaching because they're my coworkers, which is different.
yeah. And that makes like difference even like in the stuff that you teach them. So you teach them stuff like they would use immediately or like they would be able to benefit from it immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from here, I would like to get like your thoughts about like how do you see the future of AI and safety in general right now? Because like safety is like AI safety is like your area, and how do you see the future of that?
I see the future of AI as extremely exciting. Specifically, I'm really looking forward to, AI assisted drug discovery, which is kind of crazy because we still have not had an AI assisted drug approved by the FDA.
Yeah,
So, like, that means there's a lot of room to grow. Specifically, AI assisted simulations and stuff like that could accelerate, human lifespans by a huge amount. Also, AI assisted coding is something that really personally excites me. I think we've only scratched the surface. Like if you use Copilot or ChatGPT to code, you know that it takes you like 10 or 12 iterations to get something that really works well if you want to do anything slightly complicated. And there's a lot of room to grow there, especially in conjunction with methods like AlphaFold, and I think there was AlphaProof at some point that can work on automated theorem provers. If we really crack that, there's a huge amount of research that we could unlock, and we now have literally fusion energy that we could unlock from that. In terms of AI safety, uh, I think that there is a lot of room for the fields to grow in the area of formal alignment. I think that we started doing a lot of this 10 years ago with the Miri organization, and we came up with the theoretical frameworks, but we could still go into the verified frameworks there and then extract from these ultra theoretical verified frameworks, uh, actual algorithms like RLHF and constitutional learning. These are great examples of the sort of direction that you can take. And there are questions about what happens if you merge that with more deeper ideas from game theory.
okay. So you will get ideas from economic area with AI and having it with safety. That's awesome. That's nice. By the way, like we mentioned AI safety a lot, like, but like we didn't define it during the podcast. So how would you define it if like we have anyone who doesn't know that?
Well, there are two types of AI safety. There's AI security and AI safety. I was more on the AI security side, which is, I think, more where the real problems are. And then there's the AI safety alignment side, which is uh, where a lot of people in Silicon Valley are right now. So
Yeah,
in AI safety, you're worried about basically what they say is AI going boom. Uh, AI is getting smarter and then self-improving and becoming generally super intelligent and becoming so vastly much better at humans at optimizing something that they eventually turn us all into paper clips.
yeah,
So AI safety is really about preventing this future. Whereas AI security is preventing humans from using AI systems that are smarter than us from killing us all, or like using them in ways that they shouldn't be used, from preventing them from being misused. But they kind of overlap.
yeah. Have you ever like human? Yeah, that reminded me of like Person of Interest. Have you watched that series?
No, I haven't.
No, it's just like talking about an AI machine that taking over the world, and then you have two machines. One of them is good, which is like telling people that those people are good, so don't kill them, and the other is just trying to take over the world and kill that. So just like a sci-fi, but like yeah. So just it connects with the people, like what they are thinking about that these days about AI.
Yeah.
Awesome. And from here, like, what I would like to ask you about, like, how would you like connect this kind of AI safety and security with anarchy, or do you have anything that combined with anarchy right now related to that? If it's
We
not
we
stealth,
we are trying very hard to avoid doing AI safety. We are trying to build the most dangerous AIs possible. And in order to build the most dangerous AI possible, you need to know what the safest AI is.
yeah. And how you do that? Like, what is the benefit of doing the most dangerous AI right now?
I think just to know that you can.
Okay,
I
so this
think
is
I think though really what I think here is that they're two sides of the same coin.
yeah,
Whether you have a very safe AI or you have a very dangerous AI, really what you're saying is a capable AI.
yeah,
Anything that is safe in some sense is controlled. And if you're controlling it, you're saying I want it to do this specific thing. And if it's
yeah,
dangerous, you know, that means it's powerful, but it's uncontrolled, but still it's got that power in it. So I think that the key to both of these is that they're like you want to create AIs that can do what you say. And this is part of my problem with the entire alignment debate is that when a company like OpenAI says our AI is aligned, we've RLHF to do things, who is it doing things for? Is it aligned to you, the user, or is it aligned to OpenAI?
yeah,
And as a company at Anarchy, what I believe in and what we've made our mission is that, like, really, we should let other people decide who the AI is for, what the AI should be doing. We shouldn't we shouldn't be making this a statement. The AI is for this one particular purpose because that's not aligned. That's the opposite of alignment. So, in some ways, we are an AI safety company, and that we're working to make AIs that are aligned to actual users.
yeah. That makes sense. And like you mentioned that sometimes when OpenAI try to go and do something of that aligned, sometimes that it would be aligned to some political view and or it's some kind of culture groups and stuff like that. So it would not be aligned to everyone. So when you have this kind of anarchist capable AI, it will be able to like give the value to the audience that they are using or the customers and users that they are using it.
Yeah.
And from here, how do you see that AI related to developers? Since the podcast is like mostly related to the developers, so will that take their jobs? Should they be afraid? Should they just like go and shift to something new? How do you feel about that?
No, I don't think AI is ever going to take the developer's job because the developer's job has never been okay. Never is a strong word, but we're nowhere near where it's going to take our jobs because what the developer's job is to do is not to understand like some complex syntax or even really to understand the code. The majority of a developer's job is to figure out what the specification should be, and that's a process of going and talking to users, going and talking to other developers, going and gathering information and trying things and having your own personal preference. A
Yeah.
developer is somebody that's paid to have good taste in correctness. So like, and also a little bit be able to translate that into some language. So all that's happening is there's a shift in the language, and more or different people are going to get paid to have good taste.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's very important to think about. I'm just like going to take one or two questions from the audience right
Sure.
now. We have Umair. He just like yeah, he mentioned that your idea of anarchy is cool. So and then he was talking about the AI. And let me see. Yeah, he is asking me if I get a job. Yeah, no, I didn't get a job like in anarchy. No, I didn't get a job in anarchy. So
Not
by the
yet.
way, not yet. Yeah, not yet. And we have Jaber. He thanking you for this podcast and like your conversation.
Oh,
By the
thank you
way,
for listening.
yeah, awesome. Jabber has like been watching my podcast recently and even joining my live streams and stuff like that. So thank you for him. And Umair is one of from my colleagues from Ivy. Thank you for both of them for joining today. And from here, how do you see the future of Anarchy?
I see us taking over the world, becoming
Okay,
the biggest AI company ever.
okay, that's really like ambitious idea here. Okay, I would love to see that. I would
I
love to
mean,
see that.
right now, my goal is to make it easy for everybody to train and have their own AI models. And when I say everybody, I mean like literally your grandmother should be sitting there and coming up with her own data set. And
Yeah,
maybe that's a long way off because, in order for your grandmother to train models, she would need to also do a little bit of programming and we need to have AI abstract that. But I think right now we're still at a place where most developers have not experimented with fine tuning. And this is something that needs to change. There's this tool out there. I don't know if you ever played with image generation called Civit, where like you can fine tune stable diffusion models and upload the LoRa's to their website and look at like a model that has been trained to produce animes or a model that has been trained to produce pictures of alligators, and you have people rating these models. And I think that this is wonderful, but it's only like a couple hundred people that create these models and thousands of people who are downloading them. I think that we need to flip the script and we need to get everybody to be training their own models.
yeah, that's really important and like interesting idea. So here is just like, yeah, yeah. When you connect like this kind of models to get like them to people like grandmothers or grandfather and stuff like that, you will have like AI literacy with them, and then you will have like more enabled AI with us and less like, let's say, um, uh, fragmentation with that. So you will be able to have a powerful AI easily.
Yeah. So somebody asked if I ever had a startup fail
Yeah.
before
So
Anarchy. Yes, I did.
yeah,
At
would
two.
like to, you had to. Would you like to share why like the story behind them?
The first startup I did with a friend from college who became a Teal Fellow, and another friend who was a Teal Fellow at the time, and our goal was to automate bug fixing. And the reason that this failed was because we were automating bug fixing in 2012. And it was clearly
Yeah.
too early to automate bug fixing. So I did that for 3 months and then ended up at Apple after. I was like, well, this isn't working. Uh, I probably should have stuck it out longer, and I'm still really good friends with both of the other co-founders today. But like, I think I was not in the right place to do a startup, and like that speaks to how important your mindset and your like mental health is when you're doing. It's not that I was like mentally unhealthy, but like, you know, my girlfriend had just broken up with me, and I was thinking about that and not building a startup.
Yeah.
Uh, so then my second startup was a social mobile local app, and this was 2016. It was too late, and I was very stubborn. I did it with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we worked on it together for a year. And my best friend from college, we had an amazing year hanging out and partying. But we did the same thing, and we never pivoted, and we never came upon a big business revelation. And I'd say the biggest lesson there is I did not read or grow enough, and I was too stubborn.
Oh, okay. And how would you like know that you need to do a pivot or something like that?
I you never need to pivot.
Yeah.
Not literally never. Sometimes like your idea is just completely dumb. You've been working away at it for super super long. What you need to do, the way that I feel like it needs to be done right now is you need to grow your perspective or shrink your perspective.
Yeah.
So if you think of like a specific product being like one point on a map, and like your idea being like a little circle around it where there could be a lot of little like products in it, right? Usually when people start out, they have this very small circle and like a big point within that circle, and that thing doesn't work.
Yeah.
what you try to do is you try to grow that point within the circle. And sorry,
That's
just
fine. I can understand
you
that.
try to grow that point within the circle, but what you should do is you should try to grow the circle and say, okay, now my idea is a lot of different things. And then you try a lot of different things and you see some of these things, either like some of the things work a little better. So I'm going to focus on building that like one thing within this bigger idea. And then it's not quite working. So you're always, it's instead of like one day being like, I'm pivoting my entire idea, you should be pivoting every day. Just find a little pivot every day.
Yeah. So you have little like fragmentation every. That's awesome. That's really interesting. And we have like a question which is like created. Do you have like are you going into this journey with like you mentioned that you had co-founders with the both
Yeah.
like first two companies, but like what about Anarchy? Are you like do you have co-founders right now?
No, I don't have co-founders for Anarchy.
Okay, so just like you are going along right now.
Yeah.
And how do you feel the impact like based on like having co-founders and just like going alone?
Having co-founders, it lets you abdicate responsibility a little bit, which is a good feeling and a bad feeling. And also, you know, I feel like I've never really had a co-founder that's been like a true like vision co-founder that shares the exact same vision on what I want. And I think that might be a very different feeling. When I see successful companies that have a lot of co-founders or that have co-founders, you talk to them, they do actually all like think the same way. They've known each other for 20 years and
Yeah.
they share similar visions. And I just don't have somebody like that in my life. So hard to say how it would feel.
Yeah, I get that. I can understand that. And let's just, yeah, we have a question format which is like asking what,
Sure.
not format, from Umair. He's asking what's the biggest limitation in AI?
So the biggest limitation in AI, AIs cannot reason. It is a lie that ChatGPT can reason. It's pretty good at convincing you that it can reason, but if you ever try to use it like in downstream agentic tasks, so like early when I was talking about our second pivot at Anarchy, we were building this OpenAI competitor system. Uh, we were building these complex task solving AIs, and that involved lots of very hard tasks, getting it to pick like whether two sentences were semantically equivalent.
Yeah,
And like we were using GPT-4 and like just its ability to tell you whether like a cat is blue and a feline is blue is the same sentence. It just cannot tell you whether those mean the same things or not, even given a number of previous examples. Just it's so clarifying about the how limited these things are in terms of their reasoning capabilities.
yeah. Because like at the end, like AI is just like mathematical equation that's working in the background and
Yeah.
just doing calculation for you.
Yeah, and right now there are some more concrete limitations that everybody should be aware of. The context window is still actually rather small. We have the 100,000 character context windows that OpenAI and Anthropic are touting, but like they seem to have maybe reached the limit and they're using a number of like crazy tasks, but it's still linear in the size of the context window. You don't want AI systems to be linear in the size of the context window. Imagine if you yourself had linear scaling in the size of the context window. That means every time you had a new moment in your life that you had to think about, you would have to think about your entire history of moments for your
Yeah,
entire life. So like linear processing in the size of the context window actually means quadratic processing in terms of the number of computation when you're using it in real time. So in order to get real time AI systems, we need to think of sublinear systems that work well. And right now, the sublinear systems don't work well.
yeah, that makes sense here. And from for that, like when you mentioned like this kind of sublinear system and linear system, like on context menu, I think this kind of related to the way that AI training and use like the whole life like or history to use that. And does it that related to their data and the data that's trained on top of it, or just like related to the how it's works in general?
No, it's entirely related to the architecture. I mean, maybe like we'll be able to like use cheaper architectures with more creative ways of using data.
Yeah,
But like primarily the issues are the architecture. The way that a transformer works is fundamentally linear. Uh, like it always processes all of the tokens.
Yeah. And will that change with quantum computing?
I doubt it. Maybe hard to say.
Yeah, we need to wait for that. Okay.
Yeah, we still
And
haven't seen significant. So apparently, so one of the companies in my lab at ETH was working on quantum computing. Our lab actually has one of the biggest papers on quantum programming languages called
yeah.
Silk. If you want to check it out, and they were thinking about starting a company, and they spent 2 years working on the company, and they decided to stop it because fundamentally it's like too far in the future anything that you can do. As it turns out, there are only 16 algorithms in existence for quantum computers.
Okay, so there is still very new area
So we
there.
don't know what we can do with quantum computers yet. We've only come up with 16 algorithms. Like coming up, if you come up with a new algorithm for quantum computers, that's almost like a best paper award at like the biggest physics journal of the year or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really interesting. And that's like, if anyone would like to go to quantum computing, this could be like a very like
Come up with one
promising.
new algorithm.
Yeah, that's really promising. It's really hard, but like promising idea. Yeah,
If you can
and
think of an algorithm, like a quantum computing algorithm that can do register allocation or something like that, though, then this is a very different story because, like, then you've unlocked a huge area of like general purpose computing that can be sped up with quantum computers. If you
yeah,
can like get general purpose computing to like become exponential or like quadratically faster, that's huge.
yeah. That feels like reinventing the computing, but like for quantum area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we have another question, by the way, from Umair. He asked about like the data collection will in the future like need less data to train our models.
Yes, we will see need less data to train our models, ideally.
So that's
And we're
like
going to work on it. In fact,
okay,
this is one of the things that we do in the LLM VM is we have a module that does data synthesis, and I'm currently working on a sub module that's its own package called distillery that's going to be able to do data synthesis for fine tuning. So this is a lot of what we do at Anarchy is data synthesis for fine tuning to make sure that you need less data when you're training models.
that's awesome. And if anyone would like to try that, how they should they just like go to your anarchy.ai website, or do they have
Yeah,
to
you
like
can go to
download
anarchy.ai. If you want to get to the code specifically, you can go to code.anarchy.ai.
and they will be able to see that from there. Awesome.
Yep.
I think we are almost at the end of this episode. So, like, how do you have any like last sentence that you would like suggest people to, or give an advice for people who are watching?
Don't give up.
Okay, awesome, awesome. This is like really short, but like it's important one.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
It's
Thank you
important to
for.
be short.
Yeah, it's important to be sure so they will not forget that. Okay, thank you for joining today, and thank you
Well, thank you for
everyone.
having me.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time, to be honest. I really enjoyed this episode today, and would
Likewise.
love. I could go like more, like longer, but like we already had that already before. So, thank you very much for joining today, Dr. Matthew, and thank you everyone who watched us today and who will watch us in the future. Hopefully, we'll see you in another episode. And see
Great
ya.
talking to you. Yeah.
Bye bye.